another really cool conversation that we're going to be having. Basically, someone reached out to me and emailed me. Well, actually, it's cool because there's actually a friend of mine who put me in contact with someone who works in an organization that's very deep into helping deal with the Uyghur genocide over in China. Now, I am coming into this as someone who basically knows nothing about that genocide, and I am very honest about that up front. Essentially, the conversation I am looking to have is with someone who knows about this, and I'm not going to push back, right? Like, I'm not going to challenge the validity of these claims. I'm going to take everything as is because I trust this person. They seem to be credible, and it's going to be more about me trying to learn about what is happening and trying to learn alongside my chat. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, finally.
Hey.
I heard you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
No, I'm so glad that we were able to get you on here. So thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule. I think that this is a really cool opportunity for an educational discussion, and there are a lot of people in my audience who have been wanting to learn about this. So thank you so much. Before we get too far into things, could you introduce to everyone who you are and who you represent?
Yes, my name is Rushan Abbas, and I am Uyghur American, and I'm the founder and executive director of Campaign for Uyghurs.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That is absolutely amazing. So what does some of that work involve? So you founded and you are the executive director. So what does that work generally entail for you?
Well, what's happening right now is our people, the Uyghur people, are facing modern day genocide, basically active genocide by the Chinese regime. There are more than 3 million people are in the concentration camps, and millions more are being enslaved, sent to forced labor facilities. Basically, the tragedy that has been unfolding currently is not only, it's beyond the comprehension and the comparable to the worst human rights atrocities to the world has seen, but it's not that far from us. When we are starting to see right here at home too, the Chinese regime is not only being able to get away with their wicked practices of its crimes against humanity in front of the entire world community, but implementing the control, the cheat, and the manipulation, and the silencing and the forcing to coincident and the submission from our free society here in the US. And from our universities and our corporations, and even places like NBA, Disney, and the Hollywood, and even some of the Western scholars.
Okay.
And the mainstream media.
Yeah. So that's a lot of information. So actually, it might be better for our chat if we could break it down bit by bit. So I'm actually really curious because, again, like I was telling my chat, we were doing a bit of reading. I had people send me links to read over before this conversation because I'm coming in with someone who does not know much about, like, I admit, like, I'm a novice in regards to all this. So I'm learning along with my community about this. So where does this begin? Like, why is this happening in the first place?
The Chinese Communist government occupied our homeland, basically at the beginning of the establishment of People's Republic of China in 1949. And they have been relentlessly trying to destroy our culture, and they try to assimilate Uyghur people under the different labels. Like when you look at it during the 50s, the Uyghurs were nationalists, and the 60s during the Great Cultural Revolution, we were labeled as counter-revolutionaries. And then, after that, like 80s and the 90s as separatists. And after 9/11 tragedy in the United States, the Uyghurs all of a sudden in overnight became terrorists just because they are Muslims. the true reason for all this right now is the resources, natural resources are homeland held, like 1/3 of China's natural gas and the oil reserves, and 40% of coal reserves, and the fossil fuel and uraniums and the gold and the jade, as well as 84% of China's cotton output come from our homeland, and it's about 1/6 of entire China. So the China's, the CCP's policy is, instead of living, everybody live equal rights and equal life. Actually, what they are doing today is CCP's version of Nazi Germany's final solution. Even one of the high-level Chinese government official, Hu Lianhe, he said it, actually, the Uyghur problem must be taken to the final solution stage. Well, basically, currently, everybody hear about the Belt and Road Initiative that China is basically, running on the both the land and the sea lines, the new Silk Road too. That is causing the destruction in our homeland, and they are populating the massive concentration camps because Xi Jinping's signature project for the global domination, the Belt and Road Initiative, puts our homeland in the epicenter of this project.
So that could be a really good place. So, okay, I think that the motive is pretty clear. It sounds like they're very interested in the resources that your land has available. It's very resource rich.
Yes.
They want to be able to take it. You don't want to give that over. They label you as terrorists. They can do whatever they want with you.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
that's very clear, description of what's happening.
Okay, that is awful, to say the least. So how did they begin sort of everything that they're doing right now? You explain, like, what are some of the very first things that the government did to begin, like what were some of the first steps that they began with in the genocide?
It starts actually when, let me go back a little bit. After the Great Cultural Revolution, 1979, the China started to open up to the Western countries and establish democratic relationship with United States. That was 1979. So about some years, 10, 12 years, we call it, that was the most, golden stage, golden period, actually. That's when I went to high school and university. I graduated university in 1988. But as you know, what happened at the 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre, when the Chinese students demanded a little bit of freedom and the democracy, they basically, massacred the students. And then in my homeland, started with like a Baran massacre in 1990. That is the beginning of all this genocidal policies. 1990, there's a little town called Barn, and the people were, peacefully protesting, and the Chinese government came in with weapons and they shoot and they killed everybody, and then just blamed those were terrorists. And then followed the Nohulje incident in 1997, and then Urumqi massacre in 2009, which was essentially testing the water for the atrocities we are seeing right now. And then beginning of like 2014 and the 2015, 2016, the Chinese government started to incarcerate the most well-known Uyghurs in the public eye, like the elites and the famous and the the people who can lead the Uyghur people.
Sure.
And like college professors, university presidents, famous singers, actors, basically eliminating anyone who can use, extend, or defend the Uyghur ideology and values or lead the Uyghur people.
What was the basis
so
for
they
that
were
incarceration? If you don't mind me asking.
What's that?
What was the basis for that incarceration? Like, what justification did the government give for those incarcerations?
Okay, what happened is they brought Chen Chuanguo, the party secretary from Tibet, over to run the region as a party secretary. And when he came in, first he started to incarcerate elites, saying that they were spreading ideological diseases like Uyghur nationalism among the Uyghurs by producing like books or textbooks. But then those are the textbooks produced by the education ministry's approval. All the work that those Uyghur intellectuals have done under the government's rule and the regulations, all of a sudden when the government changed its policies and it became more like ultra-nationalistic and racist, the government, and tried to, as I mentioned, run the final solution to eliminate Uyghur people, they used those. And also people who practice normal, just a very ordinary, normal practice of Islam were targeted as Islamic extremists and the radicalized Muslims if they were just fasting during Ramadan, or if they refused to eat pork, or even if Uyghur girls, they don't want to marry Han Chinese guys because she has a boyfriend or she loves somebody else or she doesn't love this Chinese guy. And those Uyghur girls are also being labeled as extremists because in the government's eyes, she didn't want to marry non-Muslim Han Chinese. That's how the excuses started to begin. And as of today, as I mentioned, more than 3 million people who are being detained in the concentration camps, they were not charged with any crimes. They are not like extremists or, they are not doing anything illegal. But when China is outlining all the normal religious activities as illegal Islamic activities, anything you do, you can be charged,
Yeah.
For example, my sister, look, I give you my personal example.
Okay.
My sister is a retired medical doctor. She speaks fluent Chinese. She dresses just like me. She doesn't cover, she's not radicalized, or she's not like practicing any kind of religious activities, but she has been taken 6 days after I speak on the panel at the Institute, one of the think tanks here in Washington, when I talked about those concentration camps and the incarceration of my in-laws for nothing. And then they took her. And recently, we just actually heard very devastating news about my sister. She was sentenced for 20 years. Actually, we are organizing a press conference tomorrow at 12:30 with congressional executive
on what basis?
commission.
On what basis did they sentence her for 20 years? Like on what grounds legally?
Terrorism, can you believe it? Terrorism.
For terrorism. Any specific action, any specific example, any specific is it was it no, nothing. Just
Nothing, not even family was notified. We just heard from some, credible source that has access to government information. I have been screaming so loud and everywhere, and social media, writing in op-eds, talking everywhere. And I just find out on Christmas Day that she was sentenced for 20 years on March 2019, 20 months ago. It was a secret trial or whatever, no, any kind of evidence was submitted, nothing. She's just taken the sentence on the charges of supporting terrorism or participating in terrorist acts. Can you imagine that?
I would like to think that we live in a world where I couldn't imagine it, but unfortunately I'm more cynical and I can. But that is awful beyond comparison. So basically, if I'm understanding this right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand. Essentially, this started out as you have a group of people, minority people in a part of China that has desirable, financially profitable resources, and they were engaging in activities like publishing books, which were completely legal under prior Chinese law, and then eventually it was changed, and Chinese law made it so that just one day later, they decided that those actions were now either illegal or some form of terrorism. And now the group, just by virtue of identifying with the group even, can be labeled as terrorism and can be sentenced for prison time or whatever it is they do for sentencing. Is that essentially what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly. The Chinese regime basically has declared all Uyghur people are a people that need to be cured because of their ethnicity, race, and religion. And the government has deliberately trying to exterminate them. When there was a CNN interview, if you search Sui Tian Kai and the CNN, I think that was in spring of 2019, when the reporter asked him about these camps. Well, back then they were claiming those are re-education centers. He said it actually very clearly. He said, by putting the Uyghurs through those re-education centers, the government is trying to make them normal people. Imagine that. The Uyghur people are viewed by the government abnormal commodity because they speak different language, because they call their God in different names, because they have different group, they have, they belong to different ethnic group, and they are in different race. Can you imagine, basically, so awful. That with that attitude, if you hear these words, what's happening? Forced marriage, mass rape, Orwellian surveillance, forced abortion, mandatory birth control, forced sterilization, arrest, torture, child abduction, brainwashing, organ harvesting, crematorias next to the concentration camps, all that lead to genocide, basically. That's why I call it genocide.
So let me ask you then, because there was someone, so basically, there are some people, so I interact with a lot of people on the online left, and I'm not going to say this as if this is something that I believe. This is only to the extent that I've heard it, because there are people online who basically are China supporters, right? And they will say, they will either deny or downplay the existence of the genocide, and they will say usually something to the effect of, either outright denying it or, oh, it's not as bad. There's something happening, but it's not as bad as people make it out to seem. And, just being overplayed by different people in the media, right? So how do you respond to people who what accounts have there been of directly observing things like forced sterilization or these different kinds of crimes in concentration camps? Have you observed any of it? Have you worked with people who have been exposed in these things? What do you have to say to the people who would say this isn't happening, it's being it's being overplayed, or it's not happening?
Well, much of the proof of what's happening comes from Chinese government regime's own documents, official Chinese documents. And when you look at, it comes from Chinese regimes or their own contradictory narratives. If I start from one by one, at first, they denied the existence of those so-called re-education centers. They said, no, nothing like that happens. We don't have those. Then, after overwhelming evidence of satellite imageries, and the Chinese government's documents, and the witnesses actually who are being released, and the reporters doing excellent job covering the stories from all over the world, not just the United States, but Australia, Japan, and the UK and Europe. And then once they were overwhelming evidence, they said, oh, those are the re-education centers and the vocational camps. Then, this narrative is shown to be lies based on the people who are being detained when you talk to those former detainees. And also, when I talk about the forced sterilizations and the forced, abortions. Well, we have been talking to the Uyghurs in abroad. Almost more than 80% of the Uyghur women who lived after they get married, who lived in China, and then they went to abroad. There are about, almost 1 million Uyghurs in the diaspora.
I'm sorry, you just need to speak. Sometimes you're cutting out a little bit, so just make sure you're speaking clearly in the microphone. Just because you're explaining a lot, and it's really good information. I just don't want any of it to be lost.
Yeah. When you talk to the Uyghur women in diaspora, there are so many of them that has worked in the hospitals, either as nurses or doctors. They have performed those forced abortions on the women. And also when you talk to Uyghurs, more than half of the Uyghurs are living in diaspora. If they were married, they left, they all say that they had to have a forced abortion. And also now the current documents all come from the Chinese government's own documents, big documents, and their own data and their birth control and the Uyghur population's growth and all that. So, the other the crimes against humanity that's happening, like over 500,000 Uyghur children sent to government-run orphanages. We have so many parents, they are looking for their children. Now, currently, last 10 days or so, more than 2,000 Uyghurs in Istanbul, front of the Chinese consulate, they are holding the pictures of their kids, their parents, their brothers and sisters, demanding answers on whereabouts of their family members.
That's awful. So let me ask you, just so that people in chat can be able to go and investigate this in their own, and this is by no means the end of the conversation. I just want to know, like, is there any way to, do you have any place where you recommend that people can find information, like people, because there are a lot of people who are watching this right now. Like, I'm looking at my chat and there's basically a lot of people who are saying, holy shit, what the fuck? This is absolutely insane. This is madness. This is evil. Where would you best recommend that they go to be able to find out more information on this subject, or at least everything we've talked about so far?
Yeah, we try to post enough like resources and information on our website, campaignforuyghurs.org, and there's a tab called resources. Under that, we have listed all the like leaked documents. There are like 3 sets of Chinese government's leaked documents, and also there is a genocide report that Campaign for Uyghurs compiled, and they just simply going on the Google and the Google Uyghur, just Google the word Uyghur. There's overwhelming information out there.
Right.
And also there is a documentary coming up in a couple of weeks, full-length documentary. And the name of the documentary is In Search of My Sister, which is basically my sister's story and following my advocacy work around the world. But the documentary interviews most of the Uyghur scholars or China experts or activists or witnesses. There are like overwhelming information on that. But for people to just read, campaignforuyghurs.org website under the resources has a lot of information to begin with.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds incredibly helpful. Yeah, and we've actually, someone's already linked it in chat. So again, I direct everyone to go there. We'll probably pin it in chat. We'll have it available in our website for a while. I'll tweet about it later. I'll try to do what I can to be able to spread awareness. If it would be possible, another thing that we had as a chat kind of looked into or read about before having you come on was some of the surveillance that has been done or that's being done on the Uyghur people. Is there any extent that you're able to talk about that either from a firsthand account or at, the position, from the position that you have in your organization?
Yes. Basically, when you look at they call it Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and we use the word East Turkestan, which is a symbolic and the historical name. So when you look at our homeland, every place has like checkpoints on every corner, and the airport style screening parts on the streets. Just when you walk on the streets, you stop and go through those kind of checkpoints, and also QR scanning codes on every home. Can you imagine that? QR scanning codes to monitor who's going inside of your house and who's going out, and also facial recognition software and everywhere. GPS tracking devices on every vehicle. So basically every Uyghur is being monitored and surveilled. And also their ID card has a special chip, and their cell phones, every single Uyghur people, they have to have a special spy app on their cell phone. Every phone call coming in and out are being monitored. So the worst thing is when you talk about this, you feel like this is happening in the other side of the world, in the far northwest corner of China. But no, Chinese government is using what they are doing in our homeland as a pilot program and now exporting to other part of the world.
What other parts of the world is this happening in right now? Like for other examples?
There are about, more than actually a dozen countries that there are news reports that it's being exported in Latin America, and also Southeast Asia and the Central Asia and some part of the Middle East. Basically, the Chinese government is colonizing the entire, developing countries or African countries or Middle Eastern countries, and the Muslim majority countries through the debt trap diplomacy, and also the trade threats and the manipulation in United Nations as the second largest donor, basically keeping anybody from speaking out about these brutalities. Anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a lot. So when you say that they're exporting, so essentially what they're doing is they're sending the technology that they're using to be able to spy on Uyghur people within China to other countries as a way to kind of like handshake with those countries, like, hey, we're sending you this technology so that you can use it. Don't say anything negative about what we're doing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly. And a lot of governments that's not so democratic systems like we have in this great country, for them it's great way of controlling their people, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, when when your ideals are not exactly democratic in nature, then having a way to be able to survey, have surveillance on, giant, swaths of population as efficiently as possible definitely sounds appealing. Which is terrible, but understandable for why, China can be able to work with those countries. That's so I have to wonder then. So are there many people who are able to, so there are the re-education camps, or very heavy quotations, re-education camps. Are there many accounts of people being able to get out or escape from those? And I mean, like, we've already talked about forced abortions. We've already talked about re-education. Normally, what does like re-education, very heavy quotations, like, do you know like what actually happens for the most part in those camps? Again, we may have talked about it before, but just to rehash the point.
Yeah. According to some of the news reports and the people who are being released, or some people lucky enough to get out of China because they belong to other countries, like Kazakh citizens who are maybe ethnic Uyghur, maybe married to foreign citizens, or holding a passport of different countries. So they are actually speaking out and telling what they have faced inside of those so-called re-education centers. Very intense indoctrination, basically brainwashing them with the communist atheist ideologies. praising Xi Jinping as God, and the basically submitting themselves for the communist communist party. And also they are subject to mental and the physical torture. And they're not getting enough water to drink, so really bad dehydration, which basically damages your internal systems when you don't get enough to drink. And also very low nutrition. Like at one point, there were some reports about 600 calories a day. And there are some video clips of Uyghurs being released, and that they look like, some of these pictures from the Holocaust survivors when the Allies went and they saved them. One bone, one skin, basically, almost look like skeletons. And also many young, healthy people, after being into the concentration camps, they are released and dying after just a couple weeks later. I have a very close friend, actually, who was taken, who was actually, university graduate, my age, very healthy young man, Boris Abubakar. He was in the concentration camp for 11 months. After he was released, he died. This is actually reported in the few media outlets.
Sorry.
And there's this young man who killed himself to avoid, committed suicide to avoid taking to the concentration camps, because he heard how terrible the concentration camps are. When the Chinese government is claiming about how the people are happy, they're dancing and singing and getting re-educated and learning vocational skills so they can get jobs, but there's a reporter, AP reporter. She's Han Chinese, actually. She spent days and the days reading thousands of documents, Chinese documents, from like a purchase order, like online. So she recovered actually one facility, just one so-called re-education center, purchased like more than 3,000 pepper sprays, and then like 1,100 handcuffs, and the how many, like another a couple thousand tasers, and all this equipment you use in a prison camps, not for an education system. And those are also available online. Her news report on that, actually. So when the Chinese government is giving this rhetoric about how they are re-educating these Uyghur people, why doctors, PhDs who graduated from Japan or graduated from other universities, and university professors and university presidents, actually, successful business owners who has employed for like a few hundred people in the in the shops or factories. What kind of re-education or what kind of vocational training they need to get what kind of jobs,
Yeah. Or sorry, go on.
Basically, yeah.
No, I mean, like, that makes a lot of sense. Essentially what it's sounding like, again, like, I'm just trying to do my best to understand the situation. Essentially it sounds like, when they say re-education, very heavy quotations around that. Essentially it is an attempt to try and take people who, and it seems like it is like centralized around like the Muslim religion or the Muslim faith, right? And seeing that as like a threat to assimilating into Chinese culture, or like Chinese, like adherence to Chinese authority, adherence to like Chinese, adherence to the authority structure in the Chinese government. And so it's basically comply to our beliefs and subscribe to our, means of governance, or suffer the consequences.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is, I don't have words. I am utterly speechless. I'm trying to think.
What hurts what upsets me the most is our complicity, the complicity of the Western democratic countries. Basically, there is this Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act right now trying to address the U.S. complicity, which we have in every right to do, because China is running a slavery in those concentration camps, making Uyghur people work as slaves on a forced labor. Okay. But then there are like big corporations like Apple, Nike, and some other large corporations. They are actively lobbying at the Hill against this, just in the
Wait, against interference into the genocide, or against like
against the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which is a bill to stop the Uyghur forced labor, Uyghur slavery. So the Uyghurs are being used as slaves in the supply chain of those companies, large companies.
Sure, they're being used as cheap labor.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. The cheap labor now coming from sweat and the tears of those Uyghur professors, Uyghur doctors, Uyghur singers. They're holding them in those camps, and they sent them to forced labor facilities. Even during the pandemic, when China closed most of the factories in Wuhan and the other China proper, they brought Uyghur youth to work on the producing masks, and the working and reopening those factories got shut down. So the Uyghurs has no kind of right to refuse to go. They are taken basically from their homes, from their lives, sent to wherever the Chinese government or the Chinese military sent them to. If they say no, then they will go to the prison. So to address such a complicity of the American companies, the U.S. lawmakers introduced the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act to address the complicity of those factories using Uyghurs on their supply chains as cheap labor.
Right.
But we have actually large companies like Apple, Coca-Cola, Nike, and the others. They are a lot of money lobbying against this bill. Stop, this bill becoming a law. So that really breaks my heart to see that the Uyghur people are becoming collateral damage, economic benefits for the large corporations.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not how people are supposed to act, because what's happening to Uyghur people today, everything you heard is like a drop of the iceberg. These are a test for the conscience of the world. This is 21st century. This is 2020, and all these are happening on our watch. And yet, so many people are quiet. Mainstream media is quiet. Some politicians are not supporting this bill to prevent such a atrocity because of China's blood money.
That makes sense, unfortunately. I mean, like when we're talking about corporations, the way that, I mean, like a theory that I've heard a lot of people describe to me in the way that they see China is essentially like state-run capitalism, as in like it's like it functions in the way that a corporation does, right? It focuses on maximizing profit at the expense of people within the country. And so it makes sense to me, if you view it through that lens, that you can see a very similar, you can see them getting along with other corporations where there is a very similar profit motive, right? There isn't a profit, like there isn't a motive for like the value of life. There isn't a motive for, liberal values of, freedom and equal treatment of people and, value of, variety of expression and religion and all of that. Like there's a primary motive on profit and maximizing profit. And if people die in the meanwhile, or if human rights are violated, then screw all that, which is awful. Yeah. But it unfortunately makes sense in the way that you've described it.
Yes, when you look at, the United States and the other democratic societies' ability for the self-criticism is what leads to the societal improvements. But where are the voices from the rich and the famous who have always been so vocal on every social injustice?
Mm-hmm.
If these people take China's blood money over money over for what they have been defending, while only seeing the short-term economic benefits coming from this totalitarian evident evil, this totalitarian communist regime, then what will be the future of the free world? That worries me, because I left my homeland. I came to this great country for that freedom. Will we have the democracy and the freedom which we are, taking for granted today in this country if China China continue to actually doing what they are doing? Basically, I can bluntly say it from our previous living experiences under this Chinese communist regime. There will be no freedom, no democracy, nothing, because China is trying to set the next world order by what they are doing to Uyghur people today. Just to look at the Uyghur people, my people today, what I have described earlier. Look at Tibetans, look at the Southern Mongolians, look at the Hong Kongers today and what they are facing now, and imagine the life and the world that you are leaving behind your children. Let me just say something very quick here. I recently read a tweet from someone in New York, an American person.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt heart-wrenching emotion over the state of democracy and freedom in the world, that the principles of, which I came here to this country to pursue. He said in his tweet, what will future generations think of us if we knew of the evil of Chinese regime and did nothing? That's where we came to now. And the future of the free world that we know of is basically depending on us to defend, if it's not too late already, because China is spreading its, communist ideologies and the totalitarian system around the world. And this threatens all of us, actually. This threatens everybody who values freedom. And it challenges everything we have worked so hard in the past 100 years in this country, because Chinese communist regime is waging a war on the democracy and the freedom, waging a war on a human dignity, waging a war on accountability, waging a war on America, basically. On October 16th, on the 2020, if you search on YouTube, Dr. Li Yi, Liyi, a Chinese sociologist who received his PhD in sociology from University of Illinois.
Okay.
In his speech, he delivered in the Shenzhen Wen dialect forum in Shenzhen on October 16, 2020. This is what he said, quote unquote, "We are driving America to its death." He continues by bragging about the coronavirus, which 1.8 million lives today in the world and killed almost 350,000 people in the US, the COVID-19. He says COVID-19 is beneficial for China and North Korea. You can search on YouTube. It's still there.
How is that? I'm interested in that. I had not heard that argument.
This is what he said. This is his quote. He said, "We are driving America to its death."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just hadn't heard the argument that the coronavirus
COVID-19 is beneficial
to
for China and North Korea. That's what he said.
Okay. That's just interesting to me. Why do you know why that is? How is it beneficial to North Korea and China? Or is that are you just citing what he said?
No, he talks about how it killed so many Americans, but for North Korea and China, it brightened their future. It was beneficial for them because it put them on the upper hand. Talks in Chinese, but there's English subtitle. You can
Okay, then in
read
that
it.
case, then we don't have to get that too bogged down into that. I'll direct people in my chat who are interested in that argument to go and watch that. Who's that speech from again?
Yeah. Dr. Liyi, Liyi, and his speech on the Shenzhen Wen dialect form. I can read that.
Okay.
I can put that on the chat.
Yeah. If people want to leave that there, just because, like, again, like, I'm not trying to push back. I'm just trying to clarify so I can make sure that I can understand. And that's all. So I'll leave people in my chat to go and find that information. Because we're coming up on the hour, so actually this could probably be a good time to start wrapping up. If there is anything, because you were kind of talking about the nature of like the future of the United States, and the future of the world and the future of China, especially reconciling with having to deal with this crisis. What would you advocate for? Because there's a lot of people who are watching me and who are going to watch me in the future who are kind of like the average person, right? People who don't necessarily have a lot of political power, but who are active all the same in our country and across the world. What advice would you give to them in being able to help the plight of the Uyghur people?
Just to talk about it, educate your friends, educate yourself by reading, and then raising awareness, because China is the Chinese regime is very actively spreading disinformation and false narratives about what's happening. So get your information from credible sources, and is just act with your dignity of just as a human beings. Anybody who respects the human dignity and the rights of the people should be speaking out and act, because what's happening next is all up to us. What's happening to Uyghur people today, and defending the Uyghur people's rights and give them the respect they deserve, is actually a test for the conscience of the world. To me, there is a vow never again for similar atrocities in the history after the Holocaust, but that never again is happening all over again in our front of our face today. If the people living in the free country like United States don't take action and do something to stop this, the other countries who are being manipulated and influenced by China are not able to do anything. So basically what we are going to see is what the Uyghur people are living today will be the future of the world. I cannot emphasize this enough. I feel like broken records when I talk about this, because that is the goal of the Chinese government. They are not just going to stop with what they are doing to Uyghurs and Tibetans, because they look at this century as a century for the China's ultra-nationalism and racism to taking over the world. And they already started that with Belt and Road Initiative and everything they are doing today. So be a responsible citizen and try to help Uyghurs and help the future of the world.
Yeah.
And stand up against this evident evil. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about this. And I welcome people joining us tomorrow for the press conference at 12:30. We will be posting on our social media about how to log on the information. My niece will be speaking. She's not an activist. She's just a daughter who's trying to save her mother, who's a retired medical doctor who has been in China's dark dungeon since September 2018.
That's going to be wonderful. And where can people, so that's going to be on social media. Can you let people in the chat know where they can find that if they want to tune in and to hear that?
Yes, once I finish this session, I am going to post on our website, campaignforuighurs.org, and also on our Facebook and our Twitter. We'll have the information. so people can log on from that.
All right, wonderful. Then I will direct my chat. It's been the link to your website has been posted several times throughout the conversation, so I trust that people have access to it at this point. I really appreciate you coming on your words, because I think that I obviously agree, and I think that they ring true. I think that it's very easy for people. This is just like a little bit of I don't know. There's a lot of discussion online about basically this idea of like complicity in the face of atrocities happening elsewhere in the world, right? Some people ascribe this idea to like a theory of like the banality of evil, right? Essentially, people usually don't care so much about what happens to other people as long as it doesn't affect themselves, which is not a good thing, right? It's not good to not care about the plights of other people. Sometimes it can be hard to be able to do anything as an individual person, because I mean, like, you know, it's hard for one person to change the world. But I do think that it's important to recognize that, especially in the digital age, as we're able to, you know, do events like what we are doing right now and be able to collaborate with each other, at a minimal, people are able to spread awareness. And at a larger level, you know, I think that there is a lot of room for people to be able to engage in the kind of change like what you've described. And I certainly hope that I can be a part of it. And I just want to, I just want to be here to be able to help and mobilize my community in whatever way is most helpful to your cause.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, as an American, I very much admire seeing, voices raised, protesting injustice. So I only hope that more freedom-loving people will use their voices to cry out for us, for Uyghur people, because the world is not listening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, hey, then I'm going to leave the call. Thank you so much for coming on, and have a... Actually, I don't know if it's night where you're at. What time is it where you're calling in from?
It's I am in Washington, D.C., so it's 6:36 p.m.
Oh, okay. Yeah, same time zone. All right. Well, hey, have a wonderful rest of your evening then. Thank you so much for talking.
And happy holidays and a happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well. Bye.
Bye.
It was a very heavy subject. Like, I'm not going to say that it wasn't. It is heavy, and it's very important for us to be able to deal with that. But it's good for us to be able to learn, because, I mean, like, for as politically active as we are, I am going to fully admit I didn't know anything about this until tonight, right? Or I knew, like, the most basic information about it possible. And hopefully you all have been able to learn to the same extent that I have as well, right? And for, you know, and there's probably a million things happening in the world which are very similar, that there are atrocities happening and things to be done, and we just don't know about them yet. I hope that as I'm able to grow, that we can make a part of this experience of growing together, learning about these things and how to be able to resolve them. I like that, especially as I get ready to pursue my own political career. Something that a lot of politicians don't do. Once you start your political career, your ability to learn basically stops, you know, because now you're busy. All right, so all the time you're either fundraising or you're advocating for the things that got you elected in the first place. There's very little ability for you to be able to grow as an individual. And so I hope that either, you know, I could be able to grow, or people who are watching me can be able to grow and be able to take on political offices and hopefully take some of the things that we learn into what you do. Or even if you don't run for office, just in any kind of political advocacy, right? Be ruthless with systems, but be kind with people. Be very critical. But we are doing this so that we can be kind with people.